Good morning to all of you once again. It's a great honor and happiest moment for all of us that India gets a glorious opportunity to host the largest multilateral event of G20 Global Summit 2023 under the theme of India's G20 presidency on One Earth, One Family, One Future on its soil. To celebrate this India's presidency, on behalf of the Center for Policy Research in Maritime Studies, CPRiMeS, Indian Maritime University, and on behalf of Research and Information System for Developing Countries, RIS, New Delhi, we extend a very warm welcome to all the dignitaries on the dais, off the dais, respected faculty members, administrative officers, and students for this G20 University Connect lecture on Blue Economy initiatives. We request all the participants, please participate actively and interact with the experts after their presentation. Particularly, we are welcoming questions from the students community. So the panelists will be presenting their topics and you can interact freely with them, and whatever the doubt you have, you can ask them, and they are very happy to clarify on this. So with this, once again, I extend very warm welcome to all of you for this event. Now, let me welcome our most honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Sir, Professor Rajiv Balaji, to give the opening remarks.
Namaste. Shri Anil Trigunyat, distinguished speakers for the forum, Shri Sukrit Joshi, colleagues, dear students, a very good morning to you all. On behalf of Indian Maritime University and CPRiMeS, I welcome you all to this G20 University Connect Forum, wherein the discussions will be on blue economy initiatives. These are colorful times with blue economy and green earth, which are becoming the shibboleths of the mankind. Today's session will start with an exposition on G20. The optics of the current G20 lineup have been reassuring that international cooperation will reach fruition on several areas. Followed by this, we focus on the technologies and the research. This could be interesting as talks on how to explore and exploit the Clarion-Clipperton zone and the likes are being contemplated upon. Then we bring in the Indian perspective, particularly on how our exports could leverage the ocean of offerings. Naturally, such research and revenue projections would entail underpinning education in maritime domain and ocean studies. Management of the ocean wealth in a sustainable and judicious manner would involve not only an understanding of the oceans, but also good governance. Stitching these thoughts together, we have a bunch of experts who will carry on the talks on the blue economy initiatives. There appears to be depth and breadth in the blue economy blueprints. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development pegs the economic value of global blue economy at $300 billion US. This is the target for 2030 alone. It also projects that there could be about 350 million jobs which could be created. Noticeably, the World Future of Jobs report talks about jobs being created for green economy, that's on renewables, energy, etc. But blue economy gets no mention. We are destined to be driven by digital technologies, it appears. In that, we have learned many lessons on overexploitation and overdependence on technologies. There has been a perversion in using the planet's resources. We must remind ourselves constantly that the insanity of marring the earth is our making and we must make amends. Chief Seattle, a Native American leader, he said, "The earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth." It is with this philosophy we must approach the offerings of blue economy. lest we leave a much depleted and deranged earth for our children. On that note, I welcome you all once again to this G20 Connect Forum and to our university. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your opening remarks on this event. Now I'm happy to request our most respected Pro Vice Chancellor, sir, to felicitate our chief guest. Now I request our respected registrar to felicitate Dr. Santosh Shenoy, former Director of Inquiries. Now I request our respected Pro Vice Chancellor to felicitate our senior professor, Professor Sivakund, sir. Now I request our respected registrar to felicitate Dr. Vivekanandan, Principal Scientist. I also request our registrar to felicitate Ms. Padmasri from NIAS. I also request our respected registrar to felicitate Mr. Sudhish Foshi, RIS. Please. Thank you, sir. Now we are going to play an official video of theme of Indian Presidency 2023. I request all the dignitaries to occupy the seat. கீழே பிடிச்சிட்டு
India, home to 1.3 billion people, is a confluence of religions, traditions, and customs. A thriving global center of technology and the world's largest democracy. As one of the oldest civilizations in the world with a rich cultural heritage and diversity, and as the fifth largest economy in the world, India is proud to assume the presidency of G20. As the country blooms into a new era, we look to another poignant symbol for humanity to emerge victorious from challenges. The lotus, the national flower of India, represents our history and culture and symbolizes spirituality, fruitfulness, wealth, and knowledge. And that's the inspiration for India's G20 logo design. The design, rendered in saffron, white, green, and blue, is drawn from the national flag of India. The 7 petals in the logo signify the 7 seas and the coming together of 7 continents at G20 India 2023. Sitting above the lotus is a representation of the earth, reflecting India's pro-planet approach to life and seeing the world as one family. From this, we derive the theme for G20 India 2023, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. A theme that brings the G20's focus on shared global growth, while being in harmony with nature. G20 India 2023. One earth, one family, one future.
Now, let us start this session with our chief guest of Sri Anil Tripnath, IFS retired, former ambassador of Jordan, Libya, and Malta, and independent director of Water and Power Consulting Service Limited, and president of Multimedia India International Chamber of Commerce, and chairman Confederation of Excellency, Educational Excellency, Secretary Association of Indian Diplomats, and he has occupied so many higher positions, diplomats, as well as, and also linked with reputed national institutions on promoting diplomacy as well as relationship with other countries. So he is going to give you a talk on significance and overall perspectives on G20. Now I welcome our chief guest to deliver his lecture.
Can go from here? Namaskar, a very good morning. Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, esteemed faculty, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and dear students. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to be joining you with the, I would say, connivance of RIS that I'm able to come here and share some of my thoughts on one of the most momentous
foreign policy achievements of India in recent times, because it has lasted for nearly a year. And so G20, we are seeing everywhere the logos all around. The government is talking, the media is talking, but very often we don't go into what exactly it constitutes. What is it going to provide us? Why such a big hype in the first place? So I would just try to capture a few essentials. Now, two things we have to keep in mind: that G20, as its name suggests, has 20 members, 19 countries, and one European Union, which by itself has 27 countries. There are permanent members who are coming there. And this came in the wake of economic downturn, what happened in 1997-98, if you recall, and once again in 2008-9, when we have a major economic downturn and globally. And therefore, the leaders from the countries, and you all must have heard about G7, that there are these powerful Western economies who are part of that group. G8, Russia was one of them, but 2014, after the invasion of Ukraine and taking over of Crimea in 2014, Russia was suspended from G7. But India has consistently been invited to be a part of G7. So G7 is one grouping, which is of all developed countries. But then eventually they decided and realized rather that it is not possible for only those developed countries to define the rules and work together, because the actual real thing that was happening in the South. The economies of China, economies of India, the other countries, new groupings that were emerging were causing a bigger challenge. Markets were here in this part of the world. And therefore, this G20 acquired a greater prominence. And then we saw that in 2008, we had the summit level interactions. That means the presidents and prime ministers of these major countries, which has the Western economies, the developed economies, and the emerging economies together coming in that. So you have today this G20, which is representing nearly 90% of the global GDP, nearly 2/3 of the population, 75-80% of the global trade. So there cannot be a more stronger body in dealing with the geoeconomic issues, whether it is the trading, whether it is financial instruments, or whether deciding on the global corporate tax. So all these things were very, very important, and these countries have been doing it so far reasonably well. The G20 also had certain problems, which I must tell you in the beginning before we start. So we can't overhype it, nor we can underestimate its importance. The problem is that anything that happens in this organization has to happen by consensus. Every country has to agree, and if any of them do not agree, then you cannot have the declaration, you cannot have the agreements, which has been, we have read in the papers recently, has been a major challenge for India. It was a problem and a challenge for Indonesia, which preceded us. But at that time, India played a very major role, and eventually we had the Bali Declaration. See, what happens is, there are, as we will see, there are a large number of groups that keep on meeting. There are studies conducted in different countries, various recommendations come about, and eventually you have something called a declaration of the country. So Rome Declaration was there before that. Now we had Riyadh Declaration was there. Then we have Bali Declaration. But because of this Russia-Ukraine war, they were not coming to some kind of a terminology, and this is generally considered as a washout if there is no declaration issued. So that is something that keeps the governments today, including India, on a bit of a tenterhook. Exactly how we are going to bring about these two diverse groups, one led by Russia, China, the other by the Americans and this. So today, the geoeconomics, which is impacting nearly everyone post-pandemic, has been converted into the geopolitics. So they want to condemn Russia in this. Of course, Russians will not participate. If they don't participate or China does not participate, then you cannot issue the declaration. There will be no agreement. So that has been the biggest challenge for the Indian diplomacy, exactly how we are going to bring them about. So these are the initial things. Secondly, this is, even though it is by consensus, everything that we agree, there is no enforcement mechanism in the G20. So the countries have to themselves undertake, because they have agreed at some forum that we are going to implement XYZ, and therefore it is important that we pursue it ourselves. So this is a self-imposing regulations that the countries do. So whatever they agree has a very large impact globally and otherwise. Now, as I mentioned that G20 has 19 plus 1 countries. The important part is that every country or host country also has the potential and possibility of inviting several other countries. India's invitation went to 9 countries, depending on you see, this is entirely your choice, who you think should be there according to us. So we had countries from the Middle East, which are very important, close partners of India, 1 or 2 countries from Europe, some others from Africa. So India has invited 9 countries, which are listed also there. Now, these countries from our point of view are very, very important, because they are forming a part of our Global South strategy. And then we have few organizations which also have been invited. One of them is, of course, you must have heard about, and we heard about the renewable energy, is International Solar Alliance. In 2015, after the Paris Accord, India and France jointly signed this agreement for focusing on the renewable energy, empowering various countries to adapt to this. So eventually, the targets of sustainable development and growth are achieved through renewables, and lesser carbonization takes place. So that is something, so they are invited. Then India also launched another major initiative called Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. And they are also, again, on our invitee list. Now, the G20, as I mentioned, that it represents the major part of the world. Let me just, I can't see it there, so let me just put it here. Yeah. So several summits have been held since then, and let's just look at it, a few, this which I just generally mentioned about it, that what we had decided was that we are going to take it beyond Delhi. That has been the government's approach, that when we organize this G20, and many people say, what is the big deal? Every country gets to do that. We are doing it for the first time in 20 odd years since it was launched. And so that is a big thing for us. Of course, in 1999, when it was held, we had a finance ministers meeting, because it was started at the level of finance ministers and central bank governors. Because that was the direct impact, in which also India had one time chaired these sessions of that particular thing. So this is actually at the head of state level, head of government level, this is the first time that India is hosting it. Now, it acquires a greater importance in the sense that there are not 1 or 2 countries from developing world. This is the first time there are 4 developing countries will be chairing it consecutively. That was Indonesia last year, This year is India, next year will be Brazil, and then will be South Africa. So the 4 countries, so that's why what is agreed now, we can continue to shape the global order in that sense, the shape of things to come. So for 3 or 4 years, this is entirely in the hands of the developing world, through which we are seeing the pivot of economic development also moving. So what did India do in that? So since India has seen that and always stood for the global south, as we say, there are 120, 30 countries which are poor in that sense, who don't have a voice. So India wanted to become a voice of the global south. And as you know that we started this theme of the G20 as far as India is concerned, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. It happens to be part of our DNA. India has very recently, during the pandemic, shown to the world that even though we are 1/6 of the world population, global population, we will look after whosoever we can within our own capacities. And that's what India did during the pandemic. We provided vaccines, we provided medicines to a large number of countries. They generated a tremendous goodwill because while other countries, especially from the West-rich countries, were capitalizing on their research, India was distributing it to the needy. You know, at one time, this was called by the Africans that there is a vaccine apartheid. They did not have it. Whereas in many countries, there were 3 or 4 doses already administered to their people. They were keeping the vaccines that they were not even using in the United States, for example. They did not use Moderna, which was a European vaccine. They used essentially the Pfizer vaccines, mostly, or Moderna than the one which is from UK. And that was, they were just keeping 800 million doses of those which they did not provide to the world. Now, you can imagine that the rest of the world was dying, but at that time also, India, the moment we were able to do our own vaccine, we started providing to the rest of the world. So this is what the large number of countries realized, that there is a country that listens to us, that cares for us. And it is an ongoing process. It doesn't happen, it did not happen yesterday. Since 1964, I mean, after the non-aligned movement, and as you know that India has stood as a voice against colonialism, was an active participant in decolonization, and has been providing capacity building assistance to more than 160 countries in the world across geographies since 1964. So whatever we can do, we've been doing it. So you're building gradually and incrementally on that. So today, the world looks to India, whether it is in the international fora, like the World Trade Organization, whether in the United Nations, whether in the World Health Organization, or any other major organization, we see that India is the country that is really speaking for them, looking for their interest. Even in the climate change negotiations, India says there cannot be an equal one-size-fits-all approach. It says that there has to be a special and differential kind of a treatment. The countries that are not on the same pedestal of development, they cannot be subjugated to the same principles which the Western countries are trying to develop for themselves. And so India stands against these kind of discriminatory practices and has emerged. So we knew that what we are going to do in this particular time, so India decided that we should have theme, which is Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. One family, one world, one future. Now, it may sound very nice, but you have to prove through your actions. And since we did it, today you are reading in the newspaper the Chinese don't like the word Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam being introduced or put in the statements. But that's what it is. That India has done it, the world has acknowledged it, grudgingly, very often. The Western countries, I would say frankly, they don't quite like the idea that in India it is such a festive atmosphere across the country. So what this G20, some people might attribute political motives to it, quite likely. But at the same time, taking it to the cities, and we are one of the examples here, to different parts of India, which is something very important. Now they created the University Connect program. More than 100 universities have been approached, and they have held these kind of events to get to know what G20 is really. And also that different parts of India, including Chennai, there have been various events of various groups, which I said are holding their meetings. Now we are nearing that. In less than a month, we will have this summit. And therefore, everything eventually goes up and merges into that last summit, which will be held on 9th and 10th of September. Some of the previous summits, there we see that they are all impacted by various events during their times. But today what we are looking at is, and that we must remember, that what are the biggest global challenges for us today? And they very well are reflected in our G20 meetings. The biggest challenge was pandemic, the health, and how the world is going to work on it. There is a discussion on pandemic, some treaty or something like can happen. But if you come to see, pandemic has taught us four things, which I call as 4H, which the poorest to the richest country has to really address. Now those 4H, health, hunger, habitat, and high tech. These are the four major challenges which the world will face and has to work together. To get to all these four, you also require an international collaboration. And from that point of view also, the decisions in G20 are equally important. Then comes the Russia-Ukraine war. Just while we had not even got over the pandemic, we have come and faced this another very major challenge, and that is this war. Nobody expected that there will be a war in Europe. They thought there would be a war in Asia. USA was working on Indo-Pacific, hoping that China and Taiwan will fight, or even India or China will fight. But actually this war happened here. We are not going to go into the details why it happened, but it is continuing after 1.5 years. What this war has done essentially is, again, we have to look at the 4F approach. That was H, these 4F. Everybody talks about 3Fs. That is fertilizer, fuel, and food. But there is something else which has created a major furor in the world architecture, and that is the financial instruments. So the two sides, United States on the one side in the West, and Russia on the other side, along with China and others, have weaponized these 4Fs. So weaponization of financial instruments, it started when USA decided that it is going to confiscate $390 billion of Russian money in their banks. It will cut them out of the SWIFT, and therefore the Russians started the supplies of gas and supplies of oil and crude, which they are the richest in, and control. Then they are also where it is 20-30% of the global supply of wheat, which comes from Russia-Ukraine war. That was impacted heavily. Russia also is very strong in fertilizers. So all these had a great impact. Now they had some adverse impact in the Western countries, but the rich countries were able to manage it. At the same time, we have the countries like India, whose economy could have gone berserk if we had just not started importing from Russia. And you have all seen Dr. Jaishankar's statements in that regard. So this became a major challenge for India, exactly how it is going to deal with the situation. Not only the Russia-Ukraine war or the Russia-US war, whatever we call it, but the impact of these. So we started to know, I mean, very often many countries will say, oh, we know what the global south or the poor countries want. But India decided in January that we will have a meeting of these countries. Let these countries tell us what do they want. So a virtual meeting of about 125 countries were held in January, which is called the Voice of Global South Summit. And in that meeting, the several recommendations were received. So we did not presume that, okay, we are leading the world, so therefore we know what they want. We made them talk, and they came and they told India that these are the things that we would like to be put together. Now, this all has been shown in the film also, so that's why I'm not focusing a bit on this. But we are seeing now from there, the Prime Minister Modi came up with the 4R approach. And in that one, it was decided that we are going to follow what the world's problems are at the moment. So because you now have a bigger force, including the reforms of the multilateral institutions, whether it is United Nations, whether it is WTO, whether it is WHO. So in all these organizations are crying for reform. Why are they crying for reforms? Because United Nations came up in the wake of the Second World War. And in the Second World War, we had seen that there was this grouping which had the countries of the vanquished, which were the vanquished, and the winners. So the approach is that the winner takes it all. So they created this veto-wielding 5 countries having everything. And so whenever there is an important thing which comes up, we will find that there is no decisions are taken. For example, they will just veto it. Likewise, the reforms, like today, India is the 5th largest economy. By 2030, it should become the 3rd largest economy. And as such, in terms of purchasing power parity, we are the 3rd largest economy. It's the biggest market. You have emerged as the most populous country in the world. You have been providing the maximum number of peacekeepers in the UN peacekeeping force. We have been the foundation member of the United Nations, even before we acquired our independence. We have been the founding members of the WTO, WHO, all these organizations. Yet, we don't have a seat. We come as a non-permanent member every few years when you got elected. India's credentials have been extremely strong in that sense. So we have seen that. Now, so these become your priorities, which are very much listed. They are all coming out of these current situations that we are facing in the world. Some of these are very important from our point of view as well. It is not only for the rest of the world, but for us also, because we are looking at these rather closely. Now, when we talk of the climate change, sustainable development, you know, these 2 events, black swan events, have impacted the sustainable development goals the most. Nobody is talking about them today. And most of the country in the world, and we are supposed to reach there by 2030. But it's very unlikely because no funding is available. Nobody is working on it. Nobody is talking about it. So this became one of the major things for India that we must talk about. They must walk the talk. So whatever commitments have been made, they must be reiterated here once again, and as far as possible must be provided for. Then how do a growth, inclusive word is very important in this whole thing. Because everybody thinks of me, you, us and them. Now what we are looking at is starting from the logo, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, down to this, we are looking at the whole world as one. So inclusivity, whether of our own people or whether the global population and the countries, is of primary importance. So whatever you do, you have to continue to work in this regard, which is very important. Now, we are moving in a technological domain. Technology will decide which way the world is going to go. The digital public infrastructure, in our own lifetimes, we have seen in the last 20 years, the kind of seismic changes in technology in our lifestyles have become. So it's extremely important that this is going to be a very challenging time for us. But then in this also, there are a large number of countries who don't have the capacities, they don't have the capabilities to inculcate those technologies, or even let alone having their own R&D. Even if they can't even buy, this applies to the green technologies, and this applies to the other things also. Forget about their own daily requirements of food and all. Large number of countries are not able to afford that because of this war. So all these are part of it. Then in most countries, the women is still about 24% of women in India are in the workforce formally. So it is important that without 50% of your population being part of the same journey, your developmental journey cannot be completed. And therefore, women-led development is extremely important in this. So now we want to show to the world that we are not only power, everybody has begun to recognize India. Some say India is aspirational power, some would say emerging power. And India looks at itself as a country which, as you know, must have heard about, there's something called Amrit Kal now. These are 25 years or so. Very critical for us after completing our 75 years of independence. Now, India is moving in a high trajectory because today you are at a point from where you can take off. If you have the right policies in place and the right international environment also. So you are trying to be not only a rule follower, but a rule maker and rule shaper. So far, nobody is going to just tell you, just do this. So you're becoming a part of it. So that's why it is extremely important that we grow in trade, we grow in economic size, and we are already the world's largest, most populous nation in the world. Now, India is sensible power. I have used the word here. You see, the sanity in this global discourse is missing today. Either they're talking of, once again, the Cold War kind of mindset. Most likely, the world is moving towards a Cold War 2.0 kind of situation, depending on how this Russia-Ukraine war eventually pans out. Because if there is no Third World War, there is a possibility of that, then we will be seeing most likely the Cold War 2.0 kind of a scenario, which will be in which what I mentioned about weaponization of financial instruments. You see, most countries are trying to now transact in their own national currencies, reducing dependence on US dollar, which is the only arbiter of the financial arbitrage. So there is those already begun. But what shape will it take? What kind of systems will evolve? That will also define. So that will be a unique characteristic of the new Cold War 2.0 kind of situation. Now, where does India stand in that? India cannot be a part of the American bloc. It cannot be the China-led bloc, part of the China-led bloc. We are virtually back to, in my view, what we were in the 50s, 60s. That is, we used to call it non-alignment at the time. Today, we are looking at multi-alignments. We are part of various groups. We are part of the Quad, which is USA, Australia, Japan. We are part of the BRICS, where Russia and China are very much there. We are part of the SCO. We just chaired 2 weeks ago the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Again, China, Russia, and many other countries are part of it. Later this week, we are having BRICS Summit in South Africa. India is an important partner in that. So we are going to have these kind of situations, but focus has to remain of the G20 on the reforms of the international organizations, for which, as you know, that many countries come up that this should be not discussed in G20, it should be discussed in XYZ forum. You know, that kind of, if you're talking of climate change, they will say, no, we are going to have the COP28. Now we should discuss that. If it is a World Trade Organization, we should discuss it in the UNCTAD or somewhere else. Now, that is, those are the things that are generally provided by the Western countries for their own advantage, because they want to maintain their sort of supremacy advantage, which is what is being challenged by countries like India and China in the global discourse. Yeah, one last thing, this was the third one. This is, after that, there are 4 Rs which are here, which is an important thing to say because it defines India's G20 presidency in many ways. Prime Minister Modi, in fact, in his speech, and as you know, he's very fond of coming up with these kind of words. He mentioned about these 4 Rs, which is respond, recognize, respect, and reform. This encompasses the whole gamut of the international situation today, means respond to the priorities of the global south, what are they suffering from, and frame an inclusive and balanced international agenda. It should not be, so far, it has been mostly in favor of the developed world. And you must recognize that the common but differentiated responsibilities principle, as I mentioned, whether it is climate change, whether it is World Trade Organization, market access issues, everywhere this is extremely important. And then you have to respect the sovereignty of all nations and the rule of law and peaceful resolution of differences and disputes, which is what India during this Russia-Ukraine war from day one has been telling. India has told Russia, Prime Minister Modi spoke to Putin, he spoke to Zelensky, he spoke to Biden and everybody else. And when he said in Samarkand that this is not an era of war, directly to President Putin, he agreed with that. But then our saying is one thing, but this one phrase that this is not an era of war saved the Indonesian presidency when the Bali Declaration was issued. So this was incorporated, was acceptable to everybody in that because it did not have a value judgment. It was stopping. Now, people say that you are neutral. In today's age and time, you can't be neutral because it is impacting. And that's why Dr. Jaishankar and everybody else says that we are on the side of India. When they say, whose side are you on? You are siding with, Americans will tell you are siding with Russia because you are buying arms, ammunition from them. The Russians will say that now you are buying too much from the Americans, you are part of the Quad, so you are trying to be with them. So India says that we are on the side of India. And when we are on the side of India, the situation is very similar to what we are towards this side of Global South. So when I said Cold War 2.0, kindly connect, where will India be? In my view, India will remain multi-aligned, different across fora, and most likely will continue to lead the world, which is aiming to exercise strategic autonomy. I call that as nations for strategic autonomy. It is an important phrase which defines your foreign policy choices, security choices in the world, who you want to partner with, on what issue you want to take a decision. So you will have a third alternative or pole in that. And of course, the reforms of various institutions, as I mentioned, is very important. Otherwise, they will lose their relevance. Because gradually you must be seeing that 4 or 5 countries, 10 countries, 20 countries are getting together. Even BRICS is emerging as a new G20 in many ways, if it expands subsequently. Then life is lifestyle for environment. In India, we all know, we love nature, we respect nature, we exploit it also, but at the same time, we are also trying to understand how to find the modus vivendi, how to live with that. And India has done that. Then most of the countries in the world are very, indebted, very heavily indebted. And so therefore, the debt alleviation is one of the most important issue which India's presidency is dealing with now, right now. That's all I have covered. You all know that about the Srinagar meet that happened, which was tourism meet, it's supposed to be, on which China and Pakistan were obviously were making a lot of noises, and some of the Gulf countries also did not participate. But this provided us, this is also a larger scheme of things that we will host these events everywhere. So this was to tell the world that there is no compromise on our sovereignty. So that was one of the messages that was very clear, that irrespective of whoever thinks what, we will continue to this. So this is once again exercising your choices in a way. Now, so far, more than I think 175, this is 125 here, but by now it will be 175 meetings probably have already been held out of the 200 meetings India had planned. Now we are about 3 weeks left to the summit. We'll have the foreign ministers meeting, and once again the finance ministers and some other meetings, trade ministers, others will be held, and then they will go into the declaration. Hopefully that will be finalized and agreed to by everybody. Now it will all depend on who's going to join, who's going to come, whether Putin will talk, will join from the, by Zoom, or Xi Jinping comes here or not. So far, they have said that they will come here. Biden has said he will come. So we'll have to see whether all these people are. And you know that India is trying very hard, and this is a very big challenge for our diplomacy at the moment to somehow get everybody to come and agree to this. declaration. Already, Dr. Jaishankar said that even though we were not able to issue this statement, which is done by after foreign ministers meeting and the finance ministers meeting, because of the differences. Now you can imagine the finance ministers meeting also, the Western countries wanted to include references to Russian invasion. Now the Russians said that this is G20 is an economic institution. Here politics has no role. But on the other hand, if you come to think of it, whatever geopolitical equations or the war is taking place, it is impacting the economies of the world. So it has these nuances on both sides. It's impossible to bring them on board to say that, yes, this is active. Our hope was that all these efforts that are being made by many countries, recently by Saudi Arabia, to arrive at some kind of a solution where we can see that the war can be stopped. But we are not very hopeful at the moment. And so we'll have to see how it goes. Now, these are the things that we are trying. Prime Minister Modi has visited G7. There he talked to all the leaders. Recently in the SCO summit again, we had the foreign ministers meeting in Goa, as you know. Our friend Bhutto Jadari was there under the SCO summit. So India tried to create some kind of a consensus on key issues, because there also same issues are there. And therefore, we have this issue. Now, what India can get, of course, it's which one was this? Yeah. In my view, what we have done is, apart from addressing all these issues, and there are various papers, like today's challenges are many. Challenges are cybersecurity, for example, the financial instruments, expansion of various institutions. We have this cryptocurrency, how to regulate that. That is another very major challenge. How to create health infrastructure and accountability for everybody. That is another one. How to ensure that there is a depoliticization of the food, fertilizer, and this. So these are all on these various papers or various think tanks from across the world of all the member countries have written and provided their inputs. Many of these recommendations with regard to multilateral development banks and others, who are all part of the G20, by the way. So they're all attending these. So these are being discussed and they are being done. But one of the most important thing in my view that India could do, and what Prime Minister Modi has written to all the other leaders, that we must have the African Union represented not as an invitee, but as a full member. So I think that, because see, African Union represents 54 countries. And at the moment, we only have the 5 BRICS countries in this. South Africa is one. We have invited Nigeria as a partner, a special guest this time. But when we have this African Union, that will be a very major thing. It will have 2 impacts for us. One is, we will be walking the talk. That India has included a very large part of the world. Secondly, we are invested in Africa. We are the 2 very important messages, apart from the fact that AU by itself wants to be there. Like European Union is there as a member, so should be the African Union. And that's what India is trying to do this time. And hopefully, so far we have not seen much of an opposition to it. Only thing is that the Chinese are not very happy and they don't like this, but they can't oppose it publicly. The AU's admission into this. So we will be seeing that this will be a very important achievement for India if we are able to make G20 into G21 in this 21st century. India is also trying to project itself as not a power, as a sane interlocutor. Because see, when you say that the dialogue, diplomacy, and peace are the utmost importance, so that's a sanity. That is not just shirking away your this thing. When you say that we are ready to host you if you want to come and talk, when you tell the leaders, they listen. So today, India's voice is heard. So it wants to eventually become a country which has become very important strategically for nearly everyone, as the pivot is moving towards global south. And India is very much there strategically, whether it is in the US scheme of things against China, or for Russia, or for anybody. it's the biggest market. We need to learn to leverage that. We are going to be the third biggest economy. We need to learn to leverage that for our own strategic advantage outside and have the right kind of a voice. So it is very important that India becomes eventually a go-to country, and it has already become a go-to country. That's what you see, the number of visits of various ministers and the prime ministers and the different leaders coming to India in the span of 3-4 months as was unprecedented. We have held NAM summits before. We have held the India-Africa Forum Summit of the gigantic size. But this G20 is having the people from West and from the South. So that is something very important from the East now. Now, I don't know if the climate change issue will be resolved, but India has come up with millets have become a superfood. It is accepted by the United Nations. But surprisingly, in the SCO also, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we were trying to have it included in that. We could not do that. Chinese did not agree to that. Today, Chinese are also opposing the use of the word Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. They say, no, this should not be used again and again in your statements. So they come up with these kind of things that nudges you. So our biggest challenge going forward is going to be China. There is no doubt about it. And therefore, we'll have to find a way how we are going to work with them, because at the moment we have this policy of competition with cooperation. And the Chinese also don't want to push us completely into the arms of the West, even though I doubt very much. But if you have to save yourselves, you have to find friends. So sometimes that could be a major situation. So we'll see how it eventually plays out. And the next summit, of course, as I said, that these are consensus based. In the beginning only I told you these. Now the summit is the most important thing from our point of view, which is on 9th and 10th September in Delhi. As of today, what we have is that nearly everybody is participating, according to their own embassies and confirmations that have received. And we hope that the war does not further create the crevices and that impacts on our presidency. But most countries that are participating have commented that India in its presidency has come up with novel solutions for these global and local challenges. And those have been discussed. Those have been, papers have been prepared. We will be knowing gradually whether all these recommendations will be included in the declaration. And the declaration is actually, which we call New Delhi Declaration, will be passed. So I'll stop here, and if there are any questions, I'll be very happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Developing countries together to solving their issues through dialogues, and also your highly significant contribution made by India in the past. Also, you shared the significance of the name of the theme, India's presidency, Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, one earth, one family, one future, and how it has and India's contributions as well. So now it is open for discussion that one of the program, the G20 University Connect, that engaging young minds. So we are looking forward some questions from the young people, those who are future of India. Please ask whatever related to the G20 or related to anything related on foreign policy also, since sir is a vast expertise on these areas. Please. Yeah. Yes.
I can stand. That's okay. You can take it. 1 minute, sir? Yeah. Okay. Yes, please.
Good morning, sir. Sir, since you mentioned about the India-France agreement, so sir, under the India-France partnership or the India-France roadmap to blue economy and ocean governance, sir, in France there is something called the NEMO project, which uses NEMO transceivers to track fishing boats using mini satellite data so that they don't go into protected areas. Now, sir, it has been implemented in countries like United Kingdom and Gabon. Now, India was also in talks to implement the same technology in India. So, how far has that progress been made under the roadmap to blue economy and ocean?
Well, my friend, I won't be able to tell you where we stand because I'm no longer part of the government. So I really don't know exactly where it stands. But only thing I can tell you is that France is one of our closest strategic partners, both in the Indo-Pacific and the economy, in the defense sector. And they are going out of the way. Now, for example, when we had our nuclear tests, nearly every country in the world, as Western world, had condemned India, put sanctions on India. France was the only country in the West, major country, which stood with us. In fact, not only that, they even signed various agreements to supply us arms equipment. Today, we are also using their base in Djibouti, which is, they have agreed. We have signed those agreements with them. So, in the economic domain, in the defense and security domain, we have very close partnership with France. And of course, in the naval sector also, the air, recently Rafales and all. So they're there and they have offered, to India. And we don't have that any issue. It's only our side. Very often, I can tell you today, is sometimes the problem is with us when we talk of transfer of technology. I was in Russia. Russia was providing us technologies. We were not able to incorporate or implement those. That is also sometimes, I would say, a bit of a restriction on implementation of this. So I'm not really aware this particular project you mentioned is there because I'm not privy to the government. But the only thing I can tell you, knowing from a think tank point of view, that it is a very robust partnership in Europe and in the West with France.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes.
Morning, sir. Thank you so much for the presentation. My question was, as you told, we have a India first stance. So we don't align with anyone particularly, but we have a multi-alignment policy. We are walking a very thin line. At what point, if we are pushed to the extreme, right? At what point will we be aligning towards someone? Is it like if you're pushed to the extreme? If we are pushed to the extreme, where are we going to align? If we have to choose one or the other, this is my first question. And my second question being, before the wars, the big wars or the world wars, we had something called as intercontinental physics or intercontinental technology exchange. In this particular concept, the great minds of all over the world, they used to come together and work towards betterment of humanity. There was a much more liberal policy when it came to technology. So in near future, is it possible that we can get back this intercontinental technology exchange in much more liberal way? These are my questions.
Well, the first question is which way we will go. Now,
Yes.
the main objective of any foreign policy is the security, territorial integrity, and sovereignty of the nation. And then following all those national interests, which are supreme for any government, any foreign policy. So that's the key objective. Now, suppose you are in a situation where there is a war taking place on your borders, where you know that the world is divided, and we have played it earlier. It is not the first time. In 1971, when we signed a treaty with the Soviets, seeing that the American Fifth Fleet was stationed in favor of Pakistan. We have seen what happened in China. So India did benefit from the divided blocks and successfully navigated it. so far. So I cannot say that tomorrow, but definitely, as I said clearly, that we are not going to be. You see, India likes alignments, but not the alliances. So we are not part of any alliance which is led by a major power. Whether it is United States, US recently also offered India a NATO plus alliance status, which we declined. So we are having good relations with nearly every country, but that does not mean that it will prevent China to invade India, or then we will not get the assistance. So I think that what will happen? Let's look at it. Suppose China invades India, which it has been doing, nibbling, but a scenario where China fully comes on and we are on the back foot. Now the countries, personally, my feeling is that no country will come to your help. A country of India's size has to develop its economy, has to develop its military capability, industrial capabilities to defend itself by itself. When you are strong, then you will see all the intelligence will be coming from the United States. They will be creating some other hotspots possibly to divert the attention of China so that it gets this. Russians will start coming all the time. The foreign minister will come to India, then go to China, and they try to stop the conflict. But I feel personally that at the end of the day, we will get help from whosoever is, but we'll have to defend ourselves completely. Your second question is, yes, it is an ideal scenario in which the world should have, but as you know that before Second World War, this was decided, but it did not play out because the world was divided into a Cold War kind of a scenario. So the Western countries would not share their scientific growth. So that's why you saw in space, the Soviets went by themselves in 50s and the Americans went on their own. Eventually they found some way where they could work, especially in the space station. I'm just talking about space, but there are other areas also. So they did collaborate. Most countries have science and technology partnership bilateral basis. Then there are international projects in which conferences and others happen, and there are exchanges of papers and others this happen. We have seen even in China. China and US have been collaborating a great deal on various dimensions, even as they are geostrategically competing. So I think that it is important that they should have some kind of a thing, but for that to happen, you have to have the geopolitics out of it. Because see, today, why I'm saying so is, you have just seen about the 5G fight, right? China made it first. It is far efficient as far as the reports go. I don't know for sure. They were going to roll out in different countries, but then the Western countries felt threatened. Because tomorrow's war is not going to be a physical war like this. It will be a war of technologies, supremacy of technology. So when we are looking at that, then sharing technology 100% with somebody becomes a casualty. And that's why the exchanges also become limited in the scope to that extent to your friends, partners, as they say, friend shoring. So friend shoring is possible, but the global shoring is unlikely.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I just have one last, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Sir, what vision do you have for us students over here, or what expectation you have from us so that we can contribute better to the country or to the nation, to the country or to the world. So what would be your vision for us?
Well, I always say that the most important thing is, number one, be yourself. Number two, give your best to what you are doing. You must be the best at what you do. Then only you can contribute to nation's growth. And start thinking out of the box. Because India is going to be the youngest nation until 2050. After that, Africa will take over, unless some other pandemic or something happens. So this time, this youth dividend like you, who are going to craft India in a way that it will actually become a developed country by 2047 as aimed, maybe before. So you have to, number one, professionally, ethically, morally, personally, be an honest person. That's very important. And do what you think is right, not what someone else says is right. Have a critical mind. Think of in a global term as we are used to. It's very important. But at the same time, country comes first, then comes individuals, then others, and then international community. So whatever you can contribute, so because see, you are in a very critical domain. Maritime domain is going to be the defining factor. It has always historically also has done so. But in India, somehow it was left behind in our strategic thinking. So your and the naval officers are here, they will tell you better. But I think that it is very important that on a personal level, you be honest to yourself. That's what I expect people. Because see, today what is happening, I'm checking about a lot of essays being recorded. Some essays, they are coming out of ChatGPT. People are just Google cut and paste. Now, that will not take you far. If we are going to believe in only cut and paste business, then, I mean, how can we excel? So be honest to yourself. That's what I would say. And then everything will follow.
Thank you so much, sir. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Now we will continue the discussion after the other presentation at the end. Now we will break for tea. Thank you. Please join after 10 minutes. Good afternoon to everybody. Let us start this session, the panel presentation. Now I am very happy to welcome the senior most scientist, Dr. Satish Sinai, former director of INCAIS, Hyderabad. He will talk on role of research and technology in the changing blue economy scenario. Dr. Satish Chandra Chennai was the director of Indian National Center for Ocean Information Service, ICAIS, Hyderabad. He has served more than a decade there as a director. Then he also served as a director of NIOT, National Institute of Ocean Technology at Chennai. Currently, he is an eminent professor in the Ministry of Earth Sciences Chair, and he has completed his PhD University of Cochin, and he is also postdoctoral research at the University of Miami. He is a fellow of Indian Academy of Science, National Academy of Science, the highest academic body which recognizes the scientists based on the contribution of the research in the respective field. And he has also got Indian Geophysical Union Award, Dr. H.N. Sithik Memorial Lecture Award in 2001, and he has also got Ministry of Earth Sciences Award on National Award for Ocean Science and Technology. He has wider contribution in the marine science as well as in the ocean science, and he is a physical oceanographer, and he has contributed a lot for the development of ocean science and technology at India. With this brief introduction, now I welcome Dr. Sinai sir to present his lecture.
A very good morning to all. And at the outset, let me thank IMU and RIS, especially Professor Balaji, who invited me to be part of this University Connect program, which is being held by IMU together with RSI. The topic which I had to talk is role of research and technology in the changing economy. I will restrict myself because other speakers, they will talk on the other fields, including the research in other blue economy related issues. But I will restrict myself talking about the research pertaining to the oceans. That's what I am planning to talk within this 10 to 15 minutes time which has been allocated for me. Next slide, please. The first and foremost is we know the importance of oceans, which holds about 97% of water on Earth, and it is driving our climate to and weather, and also keeping the water and water cycle going, which is most essential for the life to sustain the life on this Earth. And oceans hold the maximum biodiversity, 90% of the biodiversity. It provides half of the oxygen what we breathe ourselves as well as by the other living beings, and absorbs at least 25% of the carbon dioxide which we are all emitting, a crime what we are doing to humanity. The ocean is absorbing that and keeping itself. So in fact, ocean is acting as the lungs of the planet. If ocean is not there, the lungs will not be functioning. And also it's the major sink of carbon dioxide, single source of single sink of carbon dioxide on this planet. So whatever we plan in the for the blue economy. Of course, blue economy is required and it is essential for all the countries which are aspiring to improve the living conditions of their population as well as to develop their own countries. So the more than 75% of the Earth's area is in the oceans, and such a vast resources are available from the ocean. So the blue economy is becoming more important. But in the in our this for the blue economy, we should keep in mind that we should do it sustainably. We should not damage the ocean such a way that tomorrow there won't be ocean, there won't be blue economy, or there won't be any economy. So that is the first and foremost rule which we all has to agree and plan the blue economy or the economy blue economy activities around that principle that it should be sustainable. And as we all know that today we are living in the world of changing climate or warmer world. And if you look at the tipping point, there are at least 9 tipping points have been identified globally and 7 regional, like the tipping points like the warming of the planet itself, or melting of Greenland ice. The estimate says that if the entire Greenland ice sheet melts, the sea level will increase by about 70 meters. That means there won't be this university, there won't be Chennai, or there won't be Mumbai or Calcutta or any of those cities. So that once it starts, now already it has started, and if it accelerates, then the sea level increase will keep on increasing. So like that, there are 9 and Arctic melting. Now the report says that last 2 or 3 years, there is no summer ice in the Arctic. So that's why now there is a competition to open a sea route through that region, so that going through the Malacca Strait and going around in Sri Lanka, India, and going to the European countries for the Eastern countries will become much easier, especially for China. They are majorly planning that there should be a sea route opening through the northern sea route, and they should be able to communicate with Europe as well as American continent through that sea route. So it is becoming more problematic because the ice is melting and that sea route will open. Then again, there will be changes in the geopolitics or world order itself. So that the point what I would like to make is that we cannot leave it as it is. We should have proper research. We should understand what are the implications which are going to have for us, because it will affect our economy and it will affect our living conditions. Even if somebody else is going to benefit or somebody else is going to take advantage of these happenings. So we should be conducting research in the oceans as well as the atmosphere, and find out how this warming world is going to change our weather conditions, our climate conditions, and our economic conditions. So we should be concentrating on that. I have few slides, but because of the restriction in the time, I don't want to go into those extra slides. So next slide, please. And the third point which I would like to make is that approximately 45% of the global population lies within the coastal areas, like that we have all our major cities like Calcutta, Chennai, Mumbai. All these big cities are lying on the coastal areas within 10 kilometers from the coast. And there are reports that these coastal cities are getting threatened because of the sea level rise, as well as the oceanogenic hazards like cyclones, storm surges, tsunamis, and the rising sea level. I wanted to show an example. Can you just click on that? There, yes. See, by using two different data sets, the first one is using the click once again. No, that same. Yeah, there itself. No, just yes. When people used one data set, it showed that in India, during the next by 2050, 10 million people will get affected because of the sea level rise, just because of the sea level rise itself, because the sea level is rising and our coast will get affected. But when a reformed data set was used by correcting that with other means, I don't want to go into the details right now, it became 60 million. That means more than 6 times. But this research is done by someone else. So I think we have to find out exactly how much we are going to get affected, how our coasts are going to get affected, and how much of our population is going to get affected. Then only our blue economy will become more meaningful. And not only that, because also the blue economy, we will be planning a lot of infrastructure along the coastlines like Sagarmala project and new ports, new harbors, etc. So are they going to be viable? Are they going to stay there for hundreds of years or more than hundreds of years? Or this will get subsumed in the sea level rise itself during the another 40 or 50 years? Then our blue economy will collapse in such cases. So we had to do our research. We had to understand that. Can you go back, just clicking that triangle? And also, click on that triangle. Just, yeah, no, that slide I want. And the other issue is that the ocean ecosystem delivers 14% of our protein requirement. I think Dr. Vivekanandan will talk more about that, basically from fisheries. And the climate change driven changes in these conditions impacting distribution and abundance of many species, that is going to become a issue. So with significant implications for fisheries, protected resources, coastal communities, and food security, this is going to be a major issue, and we may have to do proper research, proper estimates, how to. I just by after talking to many of the fisheries experts at CMFRI and others, I made just a rough calculation. See, by 2050, I think that if we look at our data, our population will be somewhere about 1.7 billion. Right now we are 1.4 or we crossed 1.4. And if you assume that the 70% of that population will consume fish at the rate of, that's what some of the agriculture data says, the food consumption will increase at the rate of about 3 or 4%. And if you increase that, we will require about 20 billion metric tons of fish to feed our population. So if you look at today's situation, and I think Dr. Vivekanandan will correct me if I am wrong, today from the marine fish catch or the fish production, it has never exceeded more than 3.8 or 3.9 billion metric tons, right? And the assessment made by CMFRI is that there is about 5 billion metric tons of fish available in our EZ itself. Forget about the deep sea. So now we are unable to, because all these years data, if you take last 30 years or 40 years, we never exceeded more than 3.8 or 3.9 million metric tons. That is what we are producing, and maybe equal number we are producing from the aquaculture and other land-based fisheries, or maybe a little more than that. But we need 20 million metric tons in 2050 to feed our population. So the blue economy should plan how to increase that. So one of the ways that we have to make facilities to get all that 5.5 million metric tons which is available, that is the sustainable yield, if I am not wrong, which CMFRI says. So we should be able, but then it is only 5, and only 50% will come from the land production, from the estuaries or lakes or aquaculture, land-based aquaculture, etc. So another 5 million metric tons at least we have to produce from marine aquaculture. So this technology has to be developed. This technology should become this technology should be sustainable, and we should be able to make at least 10 million metric tons from the marine field itself. So that for that we have to think in advance and do this research to make our blue economy more sustainable and more useful and more serving for our population in the years to come. And the last point which I would like to make is that but if you look at our fisheries, I have also seen some report by the agricultural ministry or somewhere that our fish production per head, if you look at like our GDP per head is very low. It is very low, isn't it, Dr. Vivekanand? I think if you compare Norway or those countries, we are not producing even 1/10 what each fisherman, each per head fisherman is producing there. So we had to we had to develop the skills of our fishermen to produce more fish, and also the technologies, sustainable technologies to increase our fishery production. And the last point which I would like to make is that the blue economy indicates development and utilization of various forms of renewable energy from the ocean and the harvesting of resources like. So in that case, we have abundant renewable energy because 3 sides of our country is covered by the oceans. So you should be developing technologies as well as to develop technology, you need research. For example, the assessment says that we have more than 8,000 megawatts of tidal energy available from our coast. We have about 6 gigawatts of wave energy, tappable wave energy from our coast, and also from the ocean thermal energy and other resources. So we should be able to do that. Then we have another resource called the gas hydrates, which are in our EEZ region itself. And one of the estimate which I read in one of the journal, which says that even if we tap 1% of that gas hydrate which is laying in our EEZ, that 1% is enough for our 100 years to meet the energy requirement for 100 years. But we don't know how to take that because it is a solidified methane which is laying on the seabed there, about 300 or 1,000 or 3,000 meter below the water level. We don't know how and once you take it out from there and it is brought to the low pressure, because it is under the high pressure there, low temperature, it is solidified. As you bring it out, it will become gas, it will just burn and it will escape. So we need to develop technologies how we can harvest that. Otherwise, we have all the resources and we should be able to take out those resources. And the last and final is the other minerals. There are abundant minerals in our GSI has completed the survey of about 90% of our EEZ. That's what one of the report says. And there are more than 20 billion US dollar worth of minerals, various types of minerals which are lying on within our EEZ itself. And also International Seabed Authority of India has leased 0.75 million square kilometers of seabed to us to mine the polymetallic nodules which are laying in the Central Indian Ocean basin. And now today we are developing the technologies. The institute here itself, the National Institute of Ocean Technology, is almost on the verge to at least demonstrate that kind of mining, how to pick those nodules without disturbing the environment there, without disturbing the seabed ecology and other parameters, how to pick those nodules which are just laying on the seabed and then bring it to the mothership so that we can make use of those minerals which are rich in manganese, cobalt, and zinc, which is getting depleted from the land resources. And similarly, we have developed the RO subs or remotely operated submersibles. And now the task for the NIOT is to develop the manned submersible so that the man can go into the deeper depth of the sea up to the because in Indian Ocean we have maximum depth up to 6,000 meters. We are aiming to take the man to the 6,000 meters below the sea level. So this requires a lot of technology development, lot of supporting technologies, and also a lot of research. So these are the issues which I would like to highlight, which are required and which will fuel the blue economy of our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your informative and lecture on that how to develop the technology and research to improve our blue economy. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Now it's my great pleasure to invite our most respected, eminent fishery scientist, Dr. Vivekanandan. He has more than 3 decades of teaching, research, and administrative experience by working at various capacities at ICAR, Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute. He has developed new technologies and has also prepared policy documents for both national as well as international organizations. And presently he is working as a senior scientific consultant of CMFRI and also advisor to Bay of Bengal program intergovernmental organization. He has been also working with the Food Agricultural Organization FAO and Bay of Bengal larger marine ecosystem project. He has developed a lot of new areas for marine fisheries, as well as he has published a lot of research articles in peer-reviewed articles and also books. So with this brief introduction, now I invite Dr. Vivekanandan sir to give a presentation.
Good morning to all of you. First of all, I thank the IMU and RIS for giving me an opportunity to make a presentation on this topic. This is mainly on fisheries and aquaculture. You know that fisheries and aquaculture maybe a little different from your regular course of study because it deals mostly with life sciences and food production systems. But I think this is very important as far as the blue economy is concerned. The role of fisheries and aquaculture is very important because this gives the provisioning services to the coastal and marine ecosystems. So to that extent, it is very important. And there is a need for a transformation strategy if you want to achieve the real the blue economy or the blue growth. If you need to have the potential for improving supply and export of marine food systems. I thank Dr. Satish Anai for paving the way for my presentation in his previous talk. He has touched upon the very critical points in fisheries and aquaculture. And I will be simply continuing what exactly he mentioned about fisheries and aquaculture. Next one, please. Yeah, I would just like to categorize the aquatic food production system into 2 major categories. One is fisheries. By fisheries, I mean the captured fisheries, go out into the sea and catch the fish. The other one is aquaculture, that is in domesticated forms, grow the fish or shrimp, the shellfishes and things like that. And that is the aquaculture. And so the other major avenue for blue economy or blue growth is the value chain, which you will be adding to these both products from aquaculture and capture fisheries. Because when you have the product coming out from this vital food production system, you can add value to that and improve the economy of the produce coming out from these two systems. So basically, fisheries and aquaculture are the two major categories from which the aquatic food comes. By aquatic food, I mean could be fin fishes, the shellfishes like the shrimps, the mollusks like the bivalves, gastropods, and also some of the sea plants like the seaweeds, which are also our food in many cases. So these are the aquatic food, what I mean by aquatic food. And if you see these two major production systems, fisheries and aquaculture, if you see the historical trend in the production, there is a greater diversity. The trajectory of trend of production in these two systems are totally different. If you take the captured fisheries, the production, as rightly said by Dr. Satish and I, is that it is stagnating at around 3.7 million tons, 3.7 to 3.8 million tons for the last 10 years or so. So there is a potential for increasing it to 5.3 million tons, but there are a lot of problems in that because some of those 5.3 million tons which is there in the deep sea, many of them are not readily consumable type of species. And if you go out into the deep sea, the economy increases, you don't get proper revenue from that. So there are a lot of issues. So because of that, the production is stagnant at 3.7 million tons as far as the captured fisheries production is concerned. But if you take the aquaculture production, it is having tremendous increase in production. I would say that from about 172,000 million tons, 172,000 tons, 172,000 tons that was there about 10 years ago. Now it is 7 lakh tons. In a sense, it has increased by about 4 times in a period of about 10 to 15 year period. This is mainly because of shrimp production, the shrimp farms that are there in the ECR hatcheries. So because of that proliferation of that, there is good increase in production from the aquaculture side. So this is a major, and if you see the value of this, then the value from the fisheries is that it is about, I would say that the export value from the aquaculture and capture fisheries, it is about 62,000 crores in a year. So there is enough opportunity to increase these 62,000 crores through exports if you follow certain procedures. And if you see the domestic consumption, the value of domestic products that are produced from fisheries and aquaculture, it is about 76,000 crores. So in a sense, you say 76,000 crore is the value of aquatic product that is coming, food product that is coming from these two sectors, and about 62,000 crores from aquaculture. So this is actually the basic economy of the value of from these two. So what we find is that there is enough opportunity to increase this value in the years to come if you follow proper methodology or if you follow proper system of improvement. Next one, please. So if I will go by each one, these three: fisheries, aquaculture, and the value chain. So if you see the fisheries, well, if you see the objective, we need to, as I said, there is a stagnation of captured fisheries production. So there is a need to sustain the production at least at this level. If you are not able to go up to 5.3 million tons, if you can sustain it at 3.7 or up to maybe 4 million tons, I think that is what it is required very much now. So to sustain this production, we need to follow proper fisheries management measures. So now, in India, it is more or less a sort of open access type of fishery. Anybody, at least theoretically, anybody can go and take the fish from the sea. Of course, the fishermen are doing, but there is no proper regulation. There is some regulation, but there is need to improve this type of regulation. But if you see, if you want to achieve this objective, there are many challenges in achieving this objective. I have just listed some 3 or 4 of them. One is unsustainable fishing activity. As I said, there may be some craft and gear that are detrimental to the environment. That is called unsustainable fishing activity. And also there is also like catch of the juvenile fishes. There is a large amount of juvenile fishes that are caught. That means that they are not allowed to grow and multiply. So in theory, at least every fish should be allowed to breed and at least once in its life cycle. But what we find now is that more than 50% of the catch that comes, it is consisting of juveniles. That means they are not given opportunity. So if they are not given opportunity to spawn and produce the young ones, then there is a collapse. There will be a collapse of the fish stock. And also there are several other things, what you call IUU fishing, illegal, unreported, and unregulated type of fishing. Illegal fishing means using gear which are not to be used and going to the other countries and fishing in those waters. Example is India-Sri Lanka conflict. So there are several other this type of unsustainable fishing activities that is happening. And then there is a problem of pollution. So pollution, we find if you cut open the fish and see the gut content, which we are regularly doing, we find that in the gut as well as in the meat of the fish, we find the plastic nanoparticles being embedded into that. The fishes are absorbing the particles. So to a very large extent, what we are eating as fish could be, we are also eating the nanoparticles of the plastics along with the fish meat. So this is the danger which we have, and that also affects the fish population. And then habitat degradation is some of the critical habitats like coral reefs, the mangroves, etc., seagrass beds, which are spawning grounds for these fishes. They are getting affected. And because of that, also the fishes are not able to take shelter there and also spawn and multiply in those places. The other one is the climate change. So climate change, what we find is that fishes are getting distributed to different locations. The distributional range of fishes are changing. And also the phenological changes, that is the lifestyle of fishes, that they are being attached to the environment. And that, for example, the migration of birds, it should migrate at a particular time. Otherwise, its breeding is affected. So that similar thing is there for fish also. It has to spawn at a particular time when the temperature is at a particular level. That is getting changed now. So this will all affect the population, fish populations. So we need to take proper actions here if you want to achieve blue economy and sustain production from capture fisheries. One is the implementing effective management measures, as I said, regulate the fishing effort, because we have the overfishing, overcapitalization. We have too many boats than what it is required. And that results in overfishing. So we have to regulate the number of boats, the type of boats, and also the gear which are used for catching this, and what you call the input and output control measure. One thing is that where there are about 200,000 boats in this country, which is I think at least twice the number that is required. So we need to have only about 100,000 boats, but we have 200,000 boats. So the same 100,000 boats can fish and remove that type amount of fish which is being caught by 200,000. So we have overcapacity, and that results in overfishing. So we need to regulate this. And also there is also an output control option, like you have to remove only this much of fish. We are catching, let us say, off Chennai, if you are catching, let us say, 40,000 tons of fish in a year, we should not allow it to catch more fish, which is called the output control measure. So there are many such measures that could be followed. And if you take climate change, you can say that we had to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from the fishing boats. And fishing is not a great contributor to GHG. But what we find is that per ton of fish that is being caught, the amount of carbon emitted is doubling up in the last 15-20 years. For 1 ton of fish, the emission was 1 ton of carbon. But now what we find is for 1 ton of fish that is caught, now it is 2 tons. So that is increasing. So there is a need for a sort of a green fishing to achieve blue economy. It's a colorful terminology, but this is what we find. And also we have to reduce the scouting time of the fish. The fishing vessels scout around for fish because there is availability of fish is reducing. So they have to scout around for many days to get that amount of fish now. So in that respect, the services of INCA is very useful. They have the potential fishing zone advisories where you can go and fish in that particular place. So these are some of the, then other things are ensuring the equitable access. For example, access to finance, access to insurance to the fishing communities, and also access to the technology, like what I said just now about INCA's technology is now available through mobile phones. It is very simplified now. So that type of accessibility is required for technology, for data, and also we need to have sea safety technologies. So there is a lot of deaths that is happening in the high seas that need to be reduced by proper technology. And also we need to have a global cooperation because fish is becoming more and more an export commodity. The fish caught here is consumed in Japan, USA, and many European countries. So it is those countries who are actually controlling the fishing activity here. They want particular type of fish, and that particular type of fish is being caught here because there is a market there and it is being caught here. So we need to have a global cooperation and also regional cooperation if we want to sustain the fisheries. Next slide, please. Next one is on the aquaculture. As I said, there is a great potential to improve, unlike the capture fisheries, there is a potential to improve production from aquaculture. We are actually in aquaculture, we have the brackish water as well as the marine aquaculture. So we are now concentrating only on a maximum of 10 to 12 species. Globally, 400 species are being found. But in India, we have only 10 to 12 species, and there is enough scope that it can be increased by at least 20 to 25 species in another 5 or 6 years. Hatchery technologies are coming up, and there is a provision that this could be increased. So if we want to have that type of improvement, we need to have proper technology, hatchery technology, feeding technology for the fishes, and also disease control measures are also required. And then we also have to have minimizing the environmental impact of aquaculture on the ecosystems. So these are some of the things, and other things are like, which is holds good for capture fisheries and aquaculture, is to have a global cooperation and also equitable access to the fish farmers, to resources, to financial resources, as well as to insurance, etc. The last one is on the value chain. So when you talk about the value chain, there is a lot of scope here. That is, we eat only, even in India, we eat only the what we call the raw meat. We purchase fish, the iced fish and prepare. But there are a lot of opportunities for value addition, value creation, and also value realization. By value realization, I mean that there are a lot of products. For example, seaweed can be used for pharmaceutical purposes, which will improve the value of seaweeds tremendously if it is used. So there are a lot of opportunities here as far as the value chain is concerned. And also there is a lot of opportunity for preserving the fish properly, because it's a highly perishable commodity. So there is a lot of opportunity. If it is preserved properly and stored, there is enough opportunity that the value will increase. They can do proper, there is a product called sashimi, which is used in Japan. Sashimi is $18 per kilogram. It is produced from a fish called tuna. But what we are selling it, raw meat, which are selling for $2. So there is scope for increasing it by about 9 to 10 times. So there are a lot of opportunities as well as the value addition is concerned. And also there is also need for market intelligence if you want to improve the export. Who wants what, and what type of products they do want. So that type of accessibility to international markets is also very much important. And I think this will tremendously increase. As I said, the domestic market is 70,000 crores in a year. The export market is 60,000 crores in a year from marine products, from both aquaculture and the capture fisheries. There is enough scope to improve, at least double this in a period of about 10 years, even if you don't increase the quantitative increase in production. So these are some of the opportunities in and the role of aquaculture and fisheries to improve the blue growth in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your informative lecture on how we can improve the fisheries production in India and what are the challenges, what kind of actions we needed to improve the blue economy of our nation. Thank you, sir. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome our senior most professor, Professor K.M. Sivakolundu, Professor and Dean, School of Naval Architecture and Ocean Engineering. Sir is an eminent scholar and he has more than 4 decades of teaching, research and administrative experience. And he has done his PhD at IIT Madras. After that, he joined at NIOT, National Institute of Science, as a technologist and scientist, and finally Group Cadet. And finally, in 2015, he joined this IMU, Indian Maritime University. And here he served as a different capacities, Dean and Vice Chancellor, and also Dean for Consultancy, Training and Research. He has contributed a lot for this marine sector, and he's also conducted more research projects, more than 30 research projects funded by industries as well as funding agencies of ministry and the government of Tamil Nadu. With this brief introduction, now I welcome sir to share his experience.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, most of our major policy decisions are related to, in general, humanity. Nowadays, it stems from United Nations. Being a global governance framework, it's also suggested some sustainable development goals to be attained by certain time frame. These are all in general what I think that humanity should be made available of. Okay. Now, among these, 2 are relevant for today's topic. Can you just click that? Yeah. One is SDG number 4, relevant to education. Education for all, quality and equality. Yeah, click again. The next one is related to the blue economy, or rather, where we stay here, maritime university, maritime studies, education, industry, everything related to that. So now the targets intended are quite vague and large, and with enough timeline for the governments to start the policy framework and then move on to that one. Click there. Click again. Yeah, these are the 2 visions that is being added to the goals. One is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education. The other one is to go for a conservation and sustainability related issues in economy, ocean economy. So we'll go next one. The first one is in the national framework. These are all UN related things what I've been telling so far. When it comes to the national level, our government also has created a national education policy. If we see, India is a quite populous country. You all must be knowing that we have already crossed 1.4 billion. And we have just overtaken China recently. Now by 2060, it is said that we will stabilize our population. Till such time, it will keep growing. China has already stopped growing, it started declining. Now with the declining population, what happens is the elder population proportion will increase. And there is a doomsday prediction for India too in the 70s and 80s. At this rate, if you keep growing, we will not be able to feed, we will not be able to educate, we will not be able to give them a proper standard of living. So China also was in a similar state, and then they restricted the growth very drastically with their state policy. But now the situation is slightly different. Now they say that China is going to have a problem because China is going to grow older before it grows rich. Unlike Japan or developed countries became, they are also great. But advantage is they already grown, developed. China is still not a developed country. Now for India, there is a lesson in this. By not restricting, not by design, of course, we are in a slightly better position. We may be in a position to develop and then get older. It all starts with 2060 onwards, somewhere around the later part of this century, our population is supposed to stabilize and with a proper living standard. Now, this younger population, we are one of the young country in the world. Okay, the younger population keeps feeding the engine of economy. They become very useful in the business, industry, everything. You need young people. But then at the same time, young people also need to be productive. After all, we are holding only 2% of the world's land, but we are sustaining about 16% of the population. Okay. Now to make this population more productive, we need to have basic health, education, living standards and all. So the government rightly brought out a more rational framework in the form of a national education policy. It is expected to put India on a much different trajectory than it was so far. It is going to accelerate our growth rate, making it a more unified education avenues, facilities available. Now this NEP is going to be one of the bedrocks for our future, immediate future. Next one, please. Coming to our today's topic of relevance is the blue economy. Again, at the government level, though it's a blue economy and ocean-related conservation, all is UN SDGs, one of the goals, goal number 14. We too have a policy framework at a national level. So this policy document contains a few recommendations. The National Accounting Framework, this is basically to understand how much impact each component has. Unless you quantify, you can't have a proper policy intervention. So basic understanding is to get the data. What is happening when Dr. Chennai and Dr. Vivekanand, when they said all the fisheries related thing, it all based on numbers. So we need to have a proper reliable data to be generated. The next one is a marine spatial planning and tourism. So this is one of the neglected area, we can say. Even though survey activities in India is quite old, still we are not really there where we can have everything in a planned manner development. So this spatial planning is a very important part in the blue economy. Next one is the marine fisheries. I don't think we need to elaborate any further. It has been talked about more. The manufacturing, emerging industries, trade, technology, these are all the stuff that we need to handle in a way that is more efficient. See, if we see the logistics, infrastructure, shipping, we need more. But it's not only more, it should be more efficient also. Otherwise, we are going to pollute the entire atmosphere, land, water, everything. So if say for example, if you take all the Indians to have a similar transportation facility like Americans today, you can imagine how much pollution will create in our country. So we need more efficiency in this part of it. And then the coastal and deep sea mining and offshore energy, these are futuristic unless we are in par with international standards, or rather the know-how, we will not be in a position to tap them as we need it. The last one is the security strategic dimensions. These are all more of a geopolitical implications. Unless we safeguard our interests, we will not be in a position to manage them. So now these are all the broad outlines where blue economy is planned for future. Next one, please. Now, how do we implement? We need to have a sector-specific policies. Okay. Now, blue economy should be focused, and that too in relation with other sectors like education. There is a blue economy angle to the education also. The industry will have an angle for a blue economy. Commerce will have, security will have. There are so many other domains which will have interconnectivity with the blue economy. R&D innovation is central to all this efficiency improvement and managing the things in a manner that it is most efficient. And then comes the human resource planning. The human resource planning is fundamental to everything else. As we see, I'll show you two sample policy recommendation from the blue economy policy of our country. Next one, please. This one sample. This ocean governance is a subset of our blue economy policy. Now it calls upon all the constant aspects of the policy rest upon cohesive ocean governance framework that ensures the coordination, all blah blah blah. But then if you come down to the implementation, we need to have a blue economy governance framework which is being made. The National Blue Economy Fund to drive the mechanism. Then the blue economy legislation to regulate the activities so that different organizations, different entities don't step on each other's toes. And then it ends with HR capacities and the talent pool. Now you can imagine all policy planning ends with a HR element at its planning stage. Then the implementation, unless you have HR, human resources, system is not going to move forward. The second one, please. Slightly different topic, coastal marine spatial planning. Again, this also can be achieved by providing impetus to the blue knowledge in higher educational institutions. Again, international cooperation with the global leaders in the CMSB, Indian Ocean Rim countries, an example. If you see, here also the underlying thread is again HR. Now, the NEP provides the framework for how do we improve our HR. The next one, please. The NEP has come out with a lot of stakeholder definitions and what they are supposed to do and when they should do with what they should do. So first one is the central government. Its focus area is a governance. The bold letter, what I mentioned here, is somewhat more closely associated with us. Okay. The interactions between the skills and HE ecosystems to be managed. And then vocational education. See, vocational education is the one which we have been neglecting for quite some time. We all more reliant upon the academic route, not the vocational route. And vocational route also is equally important. In fact, it has got a much larger traction on the society than the academic activity. Next one, please. This only I'm going to list out the things like state government bodies. They are also a stakeholder. National Council for Teacher Education. They also need to have some role to play. The industry partners. Industry partners are the drivers of the economy. So unless we have connect with the blue economy and the education, this will not be complete. The schools, the mass education happens only at the school level. So nearly 50% of the students drop out after school final in our country. And even though we claim that we have some 1,000 universities, some 39,000 colleges, all those things, but still our ocean awareness, or rather awareness in general for civic purposes, is rather dismal. It needs further input, further implementation of more focused policy. And then the higher education institutions. Next one, please. The vocational training, as I said, it holds an important role. And then the content and book providers. This comes into play because most of our English education touches a very small part of our overall population. Unless you get into the local languages, it's going to be difficult to educate. I'm not talking about a higher level education of technology or policy related issues. The basic requirement, say, be aware of the surrounding, the basic civic sense. Say, for example, even traffic rules. So we need to have a mass education system. Otherwise, the demographic dividend that we are expecting by our youth is going to become a demographic liability when you have an unruly population with lesser understanding of the surrounding for their own good. The last one is the education technology players. They are again market-driven players. They can be integrated into the whole system of education provided for the masses, so that the blue economy also can take off. Now, as a summary, please next one. As a summary, this is what would be imagining. There is a ministry at the top, right at the top, and then there is a sector-specific, very individual policy statements to be coming out. For example, MOES, Ministry of Earth Sciences, takes care of blue economy. MOE, Ministry of Education, takes care of NEP. And there are other ministries which are all having some one way or other interaction or interlinking to this overall activity. Like for example, shipping. Shipping will have to draw strength from both these ministries for certain aspects. Now, in this, if you place a blue economy and NEP as the two cornerstones for our today's discussion, funding is one major issue. Once the funding can come from either from government or from private stakeholders, whoever is having a stake in that will have to pay for it. These stakeholders could be from government, central government, state government, local government, or even industry. Anybody can be there. That's why the previous listing has listed out all possible stakeholders in that. And then the combined activities needs to be defined. It could be R&D, education, training, but then oriented towards blue economy. With these ingredients, it is possible to create the infrastructure. This infrastructure would include the implementation of schemes and the plans that will create the ocean awareness among the masses. That's what we are interested in. To have a sustainable blue economy, the awareness should also seep through. It's not something which can be top driven. It has to be from a bottom up approach. This is more stable. And then if all this happens, then we'll be in a position to create the human resource for the entire spectrum of our requirement. For example, it can start with the policy level, policy planners at the highest level, then the industry innovators, then comes the high-tech engineers and technologists, and engineering, manufacturing, then the management, commerce, legal, skill, all these have a tinge of blue economy in that. And our duty here as a person who was involved in education in maritime, I believe this is one of the area that we need to look into. If all this happens, then the objective of SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, can be arrived at. That is in the blue economy and NEP together. So just one last slide. Next one, please. As one of a sample where HEIs and universities can be integrated into ocean literacy, along with our ongoing academic program, we are also trying to create kind of enhancement of general awareness on blue economy. On a pilot scale, IM is going to create one small training program, drawing one teacher from each school in coastal district, and then train them for 5 days, just to give a basic understanding of ocean and ocean environment. Once you give this part, they become the trainer for the trainers. This is a way, if it can spread over a period, maybe 5 to 10 years time, it's going to become like a kind of a language for communication. We also need to communicate with the earth through the oceans. So we'll have awareness of ocean resources, what is available, environment, and our responsibilities, what we should do and what we should not do. And if you do what we are not supposed to do, we also should be aware of what is the repercussion that is going to come up. So once this overall knowledge seeps through in the society, definitely blue economy will take over. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your view on the importance of maritime education, how it can be taken up to develop maritime education in India, particularly through IMU. Thank you, sir. Now it's my pleasure to invite Mrs. Batmasti Anandan. She's a project associate at the National Institute of Advanced Studies. She's working on areas related to politics, biggest economy and maritime at NATO operations in the Western Europe and the Arctic. She's currently working on the book Dividing Amongst International Actors in Regulating Deep Sea Mining. She's a very active researcher because the institute is doing a lot of research on maritime policy and other related activities. So she's going to give overview about the global maritime governance issues and threats. Please.
Thank you kindly for the introduction. Good afternoon, all. I'll get started with my presentation. Today, I'll be looking at the global maritime governance And in my presentation, I'll be addressing three questions. One is, what has G20 done so far in the maritime governance? And what are the issues to be addressed? And third, what can be done as part of the G20 India? Moving to the next slide, I'll be proposing 6 action plans. First, starting with, from morning, we've been discussing various issues, let it be from fisheries or the security and the defense cooperation between France and India. My first point is to deviate from the security and transport focus. So let's see, from the 2010 to 2022, the G20 summits from the Seoul to Bali, most of the declarations have focused on how oceans can be utilized in terms of economy, or how economically they can be leveraged. As far as the focus on the maritime governance or ocean health, there's been really a less amount of focus or looking into the marine conservation aspects. So that will be my first point. And moving on to the second would be the more focus on the ocean governance and marine biodiversity over economic leverage. So we are seeing a lot of weather extremities and anomalies that had happened earlier in Europe last year, and we are seeing an expansion of it across China, northeast of Africa, and also in parts of the North Atlantic Ocean. So how we can see is there are a lot of maritime initiatives at the bilateral level, multilateral, national, and at the multi-stakeholder level among the G20 countries. To name a few, one would be the Charlevoix blueprint and the G7 Ocean Deal, which looks into the healthy oceans, building resilient coastal communities, and collecting and sharing environmental data. There are also other bilateral collaborations between the US and the small island developing states, and also at the multi-stakeholder level, World Bank and the Credit Suisse, looking more at the governance or the environmental aspects of maritime than the security and the defense. So those are some of the projects or the initiatives that can be taken up at the G20 level by the countries. The third would be establishing a coastal zone management, taking the examples of Morocco, France, and Mexico. Morocco has developed the sustainable marine ecosystem practices, which has been approved by the UNEP and funded by them. And France has an upward initiative on building institutionals looking at the ocean governance and maritime governance, especially from the non-security aspect. As far as Mexico, it has also come up with coastal and marine ecosystems, looking at the linkage between how climate change and carbon sequestering. So some of those models can be taken as the key studies for the G20 countries to develop larger initiatives. The fourth one is the promotion of the youth. Like we see the panel, like we do need the expert advice in coming up with policy briefs, but it's also necessary to listen to the youth and to add a new lens to it. So promotion of the youth at the maritime research and policy research level, both at the technical and at the policy, like the interlink studies, would be a value add factor for the G20 countries. The fifth one would be how G20 can act as a push for implementing international maritime initiatives. I'd like to give a comparative examples of the High Seas Treaty and the developing lunar missions. We are seeing how the High Seas Treaty was under debate for almost 15 years of time. And when it was about to be passed, Russia withdrew it, saying that the High Seas Treaty was not addressing the developed and the underdeveloped, all tier countries' demands or the needs to establish equal maritime governance standards. So that's one. And second would be the lunar missions. We are seeing how Russia, US, and China have been at the forefront of launching the lunar missions, but without any overall space governance that's been launched. So this gives them a leeway to carry out missions without under like proper regulations. So in that case, coming to the recent example, China has published its recent maritime governance report, where it gives an example on how ocean governance or maritime governance has to be seen from its own perspective. So we are seeing a debate or an emerging divide between democratic and revisionist powers trying to rule the regulations of ocean governance. So G20 can take it as a proactive step to come up with a regional body of a set of standards or regulations to look into the ocean governance at the regional level. And my last point would be how India can be a leader for the global south. As we have been listening to the experts, the fisheries sectors contribute almost 80% of the marine fish production. And as far as the global south, it accounts for 80%, and maritime tourism accounts for 5%. So if we take a bottom-up approach, that would much add value for the G20 or for India to represent the global south. That would be all from my side. Look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhatnasti, for your keeping on the time. And now, due to time shortage, we are allowing one question for each speaker. If any questions, you can ask the speaker name, then they will address. Otherwise, we will go for the vote of thanks. Any questions? Yeah.
Okay. My question is to Dr. Vivekanand regarding the fish towards the. I suppose, sir, you can see me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is with regard to the fisheries sector. One of the areas I think what we need to focus on, and it is equally applicable to the agri sector, is that there is a huge yield gap. I mean, in the sense that what we can do in terms of the yield from agri or from fisheries could be improved if we go into some kind of a cooperative fishing, cooperative farming, or a collaborative kind of an approach. I mean, if we have better trawlers than individual boats going out to the sea, their catch is going to be limited, and number of people who are employed for catching a fish, even preservation of a caught fish, the iceberg that it carries is going to be less. So obviously they can't venture out deeper into the sea. The yield is lesser, whereas most of the countries which have larger yield from the marine resources, they use trawlers. The Norwegian nations and all, they are famous for sending out huge trawlers into the deep sea to produce a larger yield of fish. Is some effort being done to promote this kind of corporatization, something like what is being done, let us say, for the startups? The government is giving some additional focus to startups to put together a group of people to put in their thinking caps and improve on a particular sector or get some new ideas out of the box.
Yeah.
Similar kind of a thing is something being thought about on fisheries as well as on the agri sector.
Okay, I think a good example of what you are saying could be milk production. I think there's a cooperative like.
Yeah, milk is one of those
Milk
areas,
is
but
one
can
of
it
the-
be extended to
Yeah,
the other things?
but as far as fisheries is concerned, there are some cooperative federations already available there, but they are not functioning properly due to many reasons. I think, I mean, some rivalry, conflicts. There are so
That
many
is the
other
area that
things.
we need to focus
It is
on.
not happening. But what the government now is trying to do, even at global level and also at country level, is that to have a sort of a co-management type of activity, even for fishing, for preservation, for addressing climate change issues. There are attempts to form co-management committees. For example, if there is you identify one issue and the concerned stakeholders will come together and take a collective decision, sort of a bottom-up approach. That is what the government is actually planning to do. It will take time. I think it will not, because coming to a consensus by several stakeholders is a big challenge.
That is true.
But it's a good suggestion. I think it may take time. There are some projects on a pilot basis. These things are being planned now. Maybe it takes time, but I think it could happen. Another big thing is there is a high sea treaty by the United Nations, which has happened just last month only.
That's true, yes.
They are struggling for 20 years, and at least it has happened now. So the government has to form some cooperatives here, how we will go and do fishing in the high sea beyond the 200 nautical miles.
That's true, yes.
So I think conserving the biodiversity at the same time doing fishing. I think it requires a lot of this type of approach what you are mentioning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, somebody.
My question is to the last speaker, ma'am. Yeah. Ma'am, since you mentioned about lunar missions, now there's something called the Outer Space Treaty, but some nations are not party to it. Similarly, for the last 20 years, the High Seas Treaty was not into action, but there was something called the Freedom of High Seas Principle. But again, certain countries had reservations. So, ma'am, in reality today, when the High Seas Treaty is into application, is there possibility of accommodating reservations of nations in areas of conflict, like the South China Sea, for example? So that is the question.
Thank you for the question. Yes, right before passing of the treaty, they have mentioned that South China Sea and the maritime area that's been shared between Iran and US is going to be a conflict zone. But yes, as far as the passing of the treaty, they've not really jotted down what actually is going to be the regulation. But overall, they did not want the debates to prolong. So, which is why they've just come with a common consensus and they've passed the treaty. But yes, High Seas Treaty, even the ratification hasn't happened yet. So it's more of a debatable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if no more questions, I will invite Mr. Sujit Ghosh, RIS, to propose vote of thanks. Distinguished speakers, faculty members, and students, good afternoon. On behalf of RIS, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for gracing us with your presence and active participation in this insightful and enriching event. Today, as we come to the end of this remarkable gathering, it is my privilege to deliver the vote of thanks. Earlier today, we began this event with immense anticipation, and our expectations were not only met but surpassed. The special remarks welcoming us by Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor Dr. Raju Balaji provided us with a strong foundation, setting the tone for a day filled with enlightenment and knowledge sharing. My heartfelt thanks goes to Ambassador Anil Trigunath for his special lecture. His insights into global dynamics and diplomacy have broadened our horizons and offered valuable perspectives on India's G20 presidency. Later, the panel discussion on blue economy initiatives was a pivotal part of our event. Experts from various domains deliberated on critical matters of blue economy. I extend my gratitude to each of the panelists for their thought-provoking contributions that shed light on the intersection of sustainable development and maritime resources. I'm immensely grateful to Dr. Shenoy for sharing his expertise on the role of research and technology in the changing blue economy scenario. Thank you, sir. Dr. Vivekanandan enriched our knowledge with his insights on India's emergence as an exporter of marine food system products, especially that of fisheries and aquaculture. Thank you, sir. My sincere thanks to Professor Siva Kolundu for sharing his ideas on the role education plays in fostering sustainable maritime practices. Thank you, sir. Lastly, I express deep appreciation to Ms. Anandan for sharing her insightful remarks on the challenges and opportunities in the area of maritime governance. Thank you, Ms. Anandan. I must also acknowledge the tireless efforts of the Center for Policy Research and Marine Studies and Dr. Godantaraman, whose dedication and meticulous planning have made this event a resounding success. Thank you so much, sir. To all the students, your active engagement, thought-provoking questions, and commitment to the exchange of ideas have been the cornerstone of today's event. In closing, I would just like to reiterate the importance of blue economy by quoting John F. Kennedy. Quote, "We have salt in our blood, in our sweat, in our tears. We are tied to the oceans." Unquote. Thank you so much.
I'll request all of you all to stand and stand for the national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल गंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे